So to start, I just get 4 quarts of water and heat it up. You can see that this thing tells me that there's 4 quarts in that bottom. So that's kind of what I go by. Usually just put a little over 4 quarts, and then after it heats up, I get another bowl. This one has kind of a nice little pouring spout, which is helpful. And I put a cup of sugar in there and then pour that boiling water into it and add 8 tea bags. I usually just get the cheap Lipton black tea. It needs to be black tea. So as long as it's a cheap black tea, you should be good to go. Once the tea comes to room temperature, I'm going to just take this filter off the top. You can use paper towel, I guess, but I usually just use a coffee filter. And then I take a fork and take the SCOBY off the top and just retain that for the next time around. Then I drain off 2 cups of the raw kombucha. And this will be for next week's batch. All right. So we're gonna keep that for our next batch. Then the remaining, you're gonna go ahead and put into whatever fruit you got. So I've got 2 fresh peaches here. Then I'm just gonna use a potato masher and just kind of pulverize them. You can use a blender or something, but then it's just more things to clean. And I don't think it's really that critical. I just like to kind of squish as much juice out as you can. If you use something that is tart at all, you're going to have to sweeten it up a little bit. So you're going to want to probably take a taste of it before you add the kombucha to it. You don't want it to be tart. It needs to be sweet. And these peaches were not the sweetest. So what I generally do is I use this raw blue agave syrup. It's very, very sweet, so you don't want to overuse it, but just a little bit in there will kind of sweeten it up a bit. And that should work. So normally I would taste it and all that, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. I trust that that's fine, and then I'm just going to pour the remainder of the kombucha in. And you should see it react with that. See how it kind of foams up there? That's what you should see. If you don't see that, that's not a good sign. You want it to react somewhat. So then I just rinse this container out. I don't use soap or anything. I just rinse it out with water. And then we're gonna go ahead and get started on the next week's batch. Okay, after that gets sufficiently rinsed out, I'm just gonna go ahead and put in my 2 cups of raw kombucha. And you do have to buy this to get started for the first time around, but after that, you can just reuse that 2 cups. Pour your 4 quarts of tea. Oops. Make sure you have paper towels handy. You don't want it too full because it will kind of work a little bit and it'll push right out the top, so probably get 1 more. There we go. You want to leave a little bit of room for your SCOBY at the top. And you will have to kind of trim the SCOBY down every once in a while, but I usually probably only do that once a month. Just pour any retaining kombucha in there. And that is good for another week. So then I'm just going to go ahead and put that on top. You just want to try to cover it. It needs to be able to breathe, but you need to protect it so that bugs and whatnot don't get into it. So that is good for another week. Then I'm going to take this kombucha and I'm going to fill my bottles up. So I like using a little funnel and then this little guy just to pour that in. And that way you don't have to worry about it. If you have a bowl with a spout on it, it's going to make your life a lot easier. At least that's what I generally do. So you don't want to overfill it. But generally I get 7 bottles, so I have one for every day of the week. So after every one, then I'll just go ahead and take the strainer and empty it out. And then, of course, you just continue on until you have 7 bottles. And typically that works out just right. So I have 7 bottles and I might just have a little tiny bit left over. So I'm gonna seal them up and then put them in a dark place that is room temperature. And about 3 to 4 days later, you're just gonna pull those back out, put them in the refrigerator, and they're good to drink.